Good afternoon, everyone. So we're a bit ahead of time, but we'd like to start a special symposium that we set up to celebrate our 50th anniversary. This is a special occasion for us to celebrate our 50th anniversary of this prestigious ISSLS. And this year, we usually have 2 or 3 invited speakers, but this year we just decided to have only 1 invited speaker, and instead we wanted to have this 50th special symposium. So, and we have 5 excellent speakers from all around the world. And the first speaker that I have invited is Professor Gunnar Andersson. You know Gunnar, everyone knows Gunnar, but he's a long time member of this ISSLS, and he has been the president of many international and domestic societies. But I think he's maybe the only one who served as the president of both ISSLS and ORS. And he brought Volvo to this society, and he has so many contributions to, made so many contributions to this society. So I would like to invite Gunnar to the podium, and he's going to talk about the first initiation of this ISSLS. So please, Gunnar.
Thank you very much, Katsu, and good afternoon. I have a problem with stairs. My vision is poor, so thank you for helping me up here to the podium. As you can see here, I have a long history of relationships and positions and other things with ISSLS. It was a cold day in the winter of 1974 in Gothenburg, and my boss, who had just offered me a job after my MD PhD residency, came and said, you know, they're thinking about organizing a society, and I think you should go to Montreal. You should send in an abstract and see if you get them in. So that's how I got to Montreal. And when I got there were 67 of us, all of whom I had written articles that I had read, and I was very, very junior. And so at the end of the meeting, Dr. Farfan, who organized this, said that we have now organized a society called the International Society for the Study of the Lumbar Spine, and you are all inaugural members. I don't know how many of us are left. I know of at least one, Gus White, but I don't know if anybody else is still around. So I want to take you back to 1974. It was a strange year in many ways. This is US data. The average income in the US was $11,000. Inflation was 11%. The average house sold for $34,000. College tuition was $542, and a burger at McDonald's cost 28 cents. Now, internationally, it was also a politically interesting year. It was the year when Nixon resigned. OPEC had an oil embargo, which resulted in the US imposing 55-mile highway restrictions. In Great Britain, they were trying to do 3-day weeks because of shortage of jobs. West Germany won FIFA year, and in Wimbledon, 2 Americans won. In spine, it was also an interesting era because There was no International Spine Society. The Scoliosis Research Society was the only spine society, and it was founded in 1966, but was not international at that time. There was no MRI. The first MRI was developed in 1974. There was actually no CT, or very few CTs around. The first CT was introduced in 1972. So there was no way of looking at the spine in 3 dimensions on imaging. There were very few randomized controlled trials. I think there were 3 or 4. In the US, they use oil-based myelography to study in 3 dimensions what we couldn't study using CTs or MRIs. And there was no spine journal. It was not until 1976 that the spine journal was, that the journal Spine was formed. The treatment options were also very different. There was no microsurgery at that time. Yarsagil in 1977 published the first papers on microsurgery. There were no commercial pedicle screw systems. Roy Camille had started using pedicle screws, but he used a fracture kit. I remember going to Davos on one of these meetings that they had in Davos, and we were all sitting in a room, and Roy Camille was introducing a screw into the pedicle, he thought. But in fact, it went to the foramen, and we saw the nerve rotating around with a screw. And we all looked at each other and said, we will never do this. Anyway, Steffi introduced the first pedicle screw system in 1982 in the US. And finally, there was Food and Drug Administration approval in 1995. But before that, there were lawsuits all over the place, the so-called pedicle screw lawsuit period. A lot of lawyers made a lot of money and didn't necessarily advance spine care. There were no cages. The first cages approved by the Food and Drug Administration was Bagby, who was a veterinarian, and Steve Kuslich, who introduced the cages. There were no bone graft substitutes. There was no robotics or aviation. There were no disc replacements. Fernström had used ball-bearing balls out of metal, but they were not consistent with the materials on which they were supposed to work, so they basically sunk into the vertebra on both sides and were extremely difficult to remove. Charité was the first modern disc replacement in 1984. So how does a society evolve? Well, in the case of ISSLS, I had some scant information from here and there, and then there was a presentation at one time which included some of the information, and I tried to put it together for the purpose of this meeting. There had been some spine courses. There were some individuals out there who were creating lists of potential participants to meet as a group and to advance the knowledge base. There was a fortunate or unfortunate airport delay, which resulted in some alternatives, which I'll get to in a minute. The courses and meetings were under the auspices of other organizations, like the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. In Australia, Ron Beetham had a spine meeting in 1970, and then subsequently there was a spine meeting in Australia where there were people from different countries who participated. Ron Beetham, John O'Brien, who unfortunately I saw we lost a few weeks ago, Harry Farfan, Philip Newman, Mike Sullivan, Lee Wilsey, and Henry LaRocca. And they started talking about this. We should form a society. There ought to be a society for back problems. Some of them went home from talking to each other and started creating lists of people who they would invite. So Farfan had a list of 15 and Wilsey had a list of 15. And when they met, they found that Wilsey was not on Farfan's list and Farfan was not on Wilsey's list. But Dwyer, an Australian, also had 15. And eventually Farfan and Wilsey created a list of 50 people. Then there was this airplane delay in 1973, which resulted in these 4 spine surgeons spending several hours together with nothing else to do but to talk about the formation of a society. Dick Rothman, Alf Nachemson, Mark Brown, and Henry LaRocca. Henry went home to New Orleans and took the initiative. He actually printed stationery called the Low Back Society. Nobody knew who they were. There was no formal approval of anybody of anything, but he just took the initiative and made it happen. Then at the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons meeting in 1974, a group met in Lee Wilsey's room, and they said we should create a society. And they put together a slate of people. Wilsey would be the first chairman, Bill Fielding the vice president, Henry LaRocca the secretary, and there were regional representatives, Eastern U.S., Dick Rothman, who eventually became a very well-known joint surgeon, and George Galanti was a Central U.S. He was already a well-known joint surgeon. I don't think he did a single spine case. Western U.S., Harry and Canada, Tile, Europe, Nachemson, and Great Britain and Africa was combined, and Mike Sullivan was a representative, and then Harry Kroc was the Western Pacific representative. Farfan suggested a meeting and invited a number of people. 67 came to the meeting. The slate of people in the leadership was polished, and ISSLS was formally created with all the participants being inaugural members. I had no idea whether I wanted to be a spine member. I had just spent a month with John Charnley. I had spent 6 months with Mike Freeman in London learning to do knees, and I did hips and knees. But my research was all in spine, and so people kept sending me these crazy spine cases anyway. So the guiding principles of ISSLS were that it should be an international society. The members should have an interest in investigational studies of the lumbar spine. We were not, there was no other purpose really than investigational studies. The members could be from the clinical, biomechanical, and basic science field, and there was no difference or no categorization. The members had to demonstrate a strong ongoing interest, not just one single paper or one single study, but an interest that would continue. And the membership was limited to 150. The limitation of the membership became the initiation of the North American Spine Society. After hundreds had applied to be members of ISSLS, and most of them refused membership, They just formed another society, which is what happens when you have limitations. The first board had some minor differences. The secretary's office was placed in London, and Mike Sullivan became the secretary. We actually had our second meeting in London at the Royal College of Surgeons. The membership fee, which included room and food, was $55. We did have a cocktail party sponsored by Travenol, because Travenol was selling chymopapine, and otherwise we were not sponsored by any other organization. It turned out that the budget was not very well prepared. So in the end, they had forgotten to add the value-added tax that they had in England, and the value-added who was going to pay for the value-added tax? That was a big question. And Harry Farfan's hospital, St. Mary's Hospital in Montreal, eventually paid for it. So I think this gives you the background of how ISSLS developed. I want to tell you, I want to tell you a personal story about an encounter that I had and how friendships were created within the organization. I was on the program committee for ISSLS in the, I think it must have been 82 or 83. The meeting was in Paris, and Monsieur Courchois was the host. I arrived from Gothenburg the day before the program committee was supposed to meet, and Courchois found out, and he said, you know, Gunnar, I'm going to take you out for dinner. So we went out for dinner with him and his wife. And I had met them at the restaurant, and afterwards he said, I'll drive you home. So we went out, and he could not find his car. It was a Renault 5. But every car in the garage was a Renault 5. So we walked up and down, and then Madame Courchois said, "Le chien, the dog." And Monsieur Courchois whistled, and all of a sudden, whip, whip, there was a dog jumping in one of the cars. And we found the car eventually, and we settled into the car and drove towards the exit. He could not find his ticket. So the wallet came out, and a 100-franc bill went this way, and the doors opened, at which time he drove straight out and into another car. This was when he told me that I should probably take a cab home, which I did. And so the next morning we had the program committee meeting, and of course he's all sparking, and we were at his home. And at 10 o'clock, he said, "Gentlemen, would you like some refreshment?" And we said, "Yes, please." And all of a sudden, we heard his Moroccan butler blow champagne corks into the... but it was a phenomenal way of getting to know people. And the society in the beginning was also very much a society of spouses. This was the only meeting that my wife wanted to go to, because she knew a lot of the spouses, and they formed friendships that were lifelong. So we're going to hear more about how that developed. Now, want to talk just a few minutes about the reasons for success. I think, first of all, it was one of the reasons was that it was inclusive and it required an ongoing interest in studies of the spine. I also think that the program, which is one single program and long periods of discussion, has been enormously important reasons for the success of ISSLS. There are potential problems ahead. It's getting more and more difficult to arrange international meetings. I see in front of me meetings that are organized on the internet, and it's not the same. And you can't replace these kinds of meetings. I'm so satisfied to see so many young people here. For a while, I think we were sort of an aging society, but now there are a lot of young people. And I have great hopes for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gunnar, for taking us back to 1974, showing us the history and also the philosophy of this society, which hasn't been changed for a long time, multidisciplinary, inclusive, and friendly. So thank you very much, Gunnar. He was boss when I did my research fellowship at Rush, and he was my boss. So yeah, and it was my great pleasure to be able to invite him to the podium. So thank you, Gunnar.
So the second part of this symposia, we would have 4 speakers from different regions of the world, getting onto the evolution of ISSLS and the perspectives of different regions. And the Europe will be presented by Judy.
Okay. The ISSLS opera. Opera is Italian word. We are in Italy. Opera has been invented in Italy at the late 16th century. To translate opera into English, it means work. And when you look into the definition of opera, it's typically expressing interdisciplinary collaboration between composer and librettist. Something similar Gunnar was talking about, the interdisciplinary approach. So I will present the opera with overture and first act. Well, Europe has a long history in spine research. Just few names: Domenico Antonio Cotugno from Italy, Lasek from France, Braun-Seckart, Schultes, Schmoll from Germany, Luschka from Germany, Forestier from France, and others and others. But when I went in preparation for this lecture, I think the El Padrino of the ISSLS is this man, Karl Hirsch. When I came to this society, I have heard his name all the time. And look at this original paper from 1949 in Acta Orthopedica, diagnoses the level of disc lesion by disc puncture, 1949. Unfortunately, he was not in this delayed meeting in US. Unfortunately, he died very early, 1973, at the age of 60. But he had a very good disciple, Alf Nachemson. And this is his original paper on his intradiscal pressure measurements. Achim correct in your slides. This is the original paper, 1959. Those were really pioneers. So let's come to the first act, 50 years of ISSLS, the contribution and development of the 104 current members out of 400. So it is 26%. There were 18 meetings in Europe organized by the ISSLS and 2 additional by the Spine Week. So altogether, 20 out of 50. So that's about 40%. And the Spine Week, I think we have to acknowledge Robert Gunzburg, Marek Spalski, Dieter Grob, and myself. I think that was a unique idea established in Adelaide at year 2000. So 20 meetings. At that time, we were organizing instructional courses to promote ISSLS in the different parts of the world. We started in Prague and we were in different places, and it was always led by friends, friendship, and getting more and more international exposure. ISSL presidents, you didn't become ISSL presidents because of politics, but because of your publication, because of your scientific work. 21 of them are coming from Europe, which is 42%. The first European president was Henk Verbiest. I knew him, and when he introduced us, the spinal stenosis, he published this paper in the first issue of Spine, 1976, the fallacies and classification of lumbar spinal stenosis. I was resident in neurology, and my boss, famous neurologist, said this does not exist. Well, it existed, Henk Verbiest. Alf Nachemson, I already mentioned his name. He was president 1978, and that was the other publication in the first issue of Spine, 1976, the lumbar spine and orthopedic challenge. Gunnar Andersen, president 1989, he has spoken. That was his original publication in this first issue. This is fantastic. Those first, and you all know these papers and you are citing them. The other picture which you see here, and many and in the back behind Gunnar Andersen, Dieter Grob, that was a friendly meeting among friendships after an instructional course in New Zealand on a remote farm at that place. Bjorn Riddervik also contributed to the first issue of Spine, effects of chymopapain on nerve tissues. He showed that chymopapain is causing damage. So that basically was the end of the chymopapain. Now the first volume of Spine, 4 issues, 244 pages. Last year, Spine, 1,767 pages, and then we have other journals. European Spine Journal, 4,400 pages. The Spine Journal, another 2,000 pages. And now Brain and Spine, another 2,000 pages. Altogether, it's not there. It just took, it's more than 10,000 pages. We can't read it. Let's hope that the AI will make a little bit order in those publications. Well, Wilkes, Conny and Achim in Germany, they just took up the idea of Hirsch and Nachemson and continued to work on the intradiscal pressure. They are still continuing this work. That was his original paper, 1999, when he received the first Volvo Award, and then other ISSLS prizes are coming. Another pioneer of the biomechanics interdisciplinary approach, Michael Adams from Bristol. He impacted hugely the development of the ISSLS from the European country, from not Great Britain, United Kingdom. He received 3 Volvo Awards and ISSLS prizes. Robert Mulholland, President 1990. He wrote me a letter. We did contribute a number of papers, but never won the coveted Volvo Prize. What was important for us as generation was that ISSLS showed us that our concerns and anxieties about the management of back problem was shared with the others. And one returned from meetings reinvigorated and with new enthusiasm. I think Robert Holmoland is now in the audience. I think he is the most senior. He's age 89, still very active. Probably he is living in a very special blue zone. Next week he is participating on regatta between Europe and England. Jeremy Fairbank, very special person, and I think I spent a little bit time. He was president 2013. I see him all the time with Anne Manion in the back, and he had a big impact on her research strategy. So Jeremy Fairbank, at the meeting of ISSLS, 1981, presented as a poster, one of the 6 printed on green paper, from an Oswestry Department of Spinal Disorders, a questionnaire. He printed 200 copies, and they went all around the world. It was not even published. And look what's happened. The Oswestry Low Back Pain Disability Questionnaire is cited up to date 6,130 times. Then he adapted to the index, ODI, and it's almost every second paper is quoting ODI. So totally, it's 12,941 cited in the literature. Now, if I looked in the Google Scholar, Jeremy Fairbank has total citation 27,608. So half is on the account of ODI. So it's not the number of your publication, it's the article impact score which makes the difference. Not the impact factor of the journal, not the number of publication, it's how you impact the future development. Dieter Grob, very good friend. We were working for decades together. He was president 2007. In the middle, you have a picture of the in vivo biomechanics. He placed the rods into the vertebrae, and then we measured with Manohar Panjabi the movement, rotatory, decoupled patterns, and all this. I don't think so we would get today an ethical approval for that kind of experiments, but he did it. But he did something more important. He had the idea to create a spine tango for the Schultes Clinic at the first time, and then actually for the spine surgeons to get the outcome, the true outcome of this, what we are doing. That was the first spine surgery registry. 2002, he was the sole surgeon. I was supporting him. And then Anne Manion went the next step and created the COMI, Core Outcome Measurements Index. Now today, 2024, we have in Schultes Clinic a complete registry of outcome of 27,000 cases operated in our institution with 90% of 2 years follow-up and 82 5 years follow-up. We basically can say everything, how the surgeons are, the indication. Worldwide, we have 160,000 of cases registered. This is the way to go. Dieter Grob stepped down from surgery. He said, I want to do something new. He's artist. This is his autoportrait. He sent me, he's sending his best regards, and one of his pictures, which I like also very much. Anne Manion, I already mentioned. She got the McNabb La Rocca Travel Award Fellowship, 1994. Meanwhile, she's a highly decorated member of the society with 3 Volvo and ISSLS Award. The COMI I mentioned already. Her randomized clinical trial where she calculated that Switzerland would save 500 million Swiss francs if appropriate preventive program would be done by patients with low back pain, but the insurance companies had no interest. Teija Lund, a president 2017. She got also the ISSLS Prize 2022 from Finland, and it's actually led me to the woman power of ISSLS. It's getting more and more. The woman power, we had women in our society before it became woke that we have to have diversification. We always have women and we always have supported them. Margarita Nordin and others, they are among us. Just look around. Sport and spine. We look at this, you know, somebody wrote in the introduction that I was involved in football. It's highly neglected in sport. They talk about knee, hips, they are talking about shoulder, but there is no systematic investigation. We tried with Astrid Junge and Michael Meyer, who is member also of our association. Volvo Award was established 1979. I hope that Gunnar Andersen gives the true reason why Volvo sponsored this award. For those who are younger, I will explain you. In the Volvo factory, the belts were at the level of 70 centimeters. So the workers has to work like this on the belt. And the Volvo factory had a lot of problems with low back pain. So Alf Nachemson explained to the management, based upon his intradiscal measurements, that if they lift up the belt to 90 centimeters, they will have significant reduction of low back pain. The Volvo management understood, they changed the factories, and it was the clinical proof, not randomized clinical trial, it was just simple observation. And they were so thankful for this that they sponsored this prestigious Volvo Award. That was until 2002. From Europe, 34 out of 89 Volvo Awards have been awarded to European scientists. And afterwards, from the ISSL prize, 20 out of 58. So total 54, those prizes went to the European scientists. Lifetime Achievement Award. Again, this is the acknowledgement of what scientists have done and contributed to the ISSLS. And you see the name Alf Nachemson, Gunnar Andersen, Jill Urban, Malcolm Pope, Tapio Wiedemann, Max Ebbe, Jeremy Fairbank. Jeremy, this is great. I am really appreciating your work, what you have done. John O'Brien, Robert Gunzburg, and Marek Spalski. So ISSL Europe, solid foundation, research-focused, international teamwork, collaboration, and less is sometimes more. Keep it in mind, the Fairbank story. What one paper, one poster, how it can change the development. So the next generation, I skipped this about the low back pain. ISSLS future as I see it. From test and treat to predict and prevent, that's the future. The 5P medicine, as we call it, predict, prevent, personalize, participate, and promote. Think about spine health and act as long as it does not hurt. That's our duty to explain. When I see that 68% of young footballers, recreational, suffer low back pain, that's for me a strong message. Combine biomechanics, biochemistry, metabolome with genome and phenome. Individuals will participate, and ISSLS, we all have to promote. The age of scientific spine wellness has started. Maybe AI with the big data analysis, Spine Tango Comet will be crucial for the next steps for spine surgery. I started with Dieter Gropp, 1987 in Zurich. This is our spine unit today. You see the development. And I take the liberty and allow me to introduce the next act of the ISSL opera by using the allegory of my name from the New World. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. So we'll go to North America next. North America will be presented by Jim Kang, please.
Well, thank you. It's a distinguished honor to follow Yuri. He always makes all of us look good or bad, I think. But thank you again. I learned a lot from the European history myself. So I'll try to be to the point and try to give you the perspective from North America, which combines America, US, and Canada, because there's been incredible contributions in that domain. So you heard nicely Gunnar talking about the history of how this evolved. I don't want to repeat those things, but I just highlighted the North American contribution to what is one of the most important societies in my mind, which is ISSLS. See Leon Wiltsey, Ed Simmons in these impromptu meetings, backdoor handshakes, and then Harry Farfan and Alan Dwyer from Australia formed a committee of two to establish this International Lumbar Society. So North American surgeons, I think, were very instrumental in the founding of ISSLS. And then you heard these other stories in the 70s, all these meetings at the airports and various thought leaders in North America or in the US, like Dick Rothman, Mark Brown, LaRocca, Wiltsey, McNabb, huge contributors to what we understand to be principles of surgical treatment in the lumbar spine. And then in '74, as Gunnar said, Wiltsey and Farfan organized the first meeting in Montreal, and ISSLS was born. So the North American contribution was incredibly significant because they helped organize what was later to be ISSLS. And kind of going through what Dieter went through, North American past presidents, we've had 19 out of 50 presidents from North America, 15 US, 4 Canada. First 2 presidents were Leon Wiltsey, and the second was William Fielding. He was Canadian-born, but practiced in New York City for the most part. And there's been a slew of other presidents that have subsequently come from North America. There were many meetings that were organized in the early time period, and 16 US sites have been chosen. And the last one was in Boston, where I currently work, and 5 Canadian sites. So there have been many back and forth meetings. And if you look at the founding fathers of ISSLS from North America, it's a who's who's, and you have to admit, in the early days of ISSLS, it was predominantly a surgical society. And these founding fathers were very innovative and principled in who they felt surgery would help. But I think the wisdom of this group, which holds true to this day, is that they realized that when they were seeing their hundreds of patients in their clinics, there was probably 95% of the people that we surgeons couldn't help, even though these people were suffering or having incredible problems. And I think the collective wisdom of this group is that, yes, we can do surgery on some, but the vast majority and our understanding of what the lumbar spine does to people was really a black box. And we really didn't have a fundamental scientific knowledge. And hence, these group of men at the time devised a society which they felt would be very important to study the scientific basis of this clinical problem that we call low back pain, or any diseases associated with it. So I think these gentlemen should be greatly appreciated because they set the principles. And if you start thinking back of what they encountered, as Gunnar pointed out, they were seeing all these people with back pain, and probably it was sort of an ill-coined terminology, degenerative disc disease. We don't use that term anymore in this society, but it was rampant in the 70s and 80s, and people used the term disease. If you have a disease, we got to fix it. And so that probably wasn't the right choice of words. But I think these group of surgeons felt that degenerative disc disease is something that we have to understand a little bit better and more before we start considering surgery for it. So now, as the confluence of all those things were happening with ISSLS forming, about 10 years later, several different things happened in North America. And as ISSLS was starting to get formulated, there were meetings going on back and forth between Europe and North America. In the 1980s, there was a proliferation of the number of spine surgeons that were starting to get trained. And then, as Gunnar pointed out, the sort of introduction of pedicle screws by Art Steffi in the 80s went through a lot of political and legal turmoil, but ultimately it was FDA approved. But the fact that implants could be now put into the spine, industry came into the picture. And there was a lot of industry influence in the US and Canada, admittedly, good or bad. It drove innovation, drove our surgeries. And so with the proliferation of these types of surgeries, as well as rapid growth of surgeons in North America, and the fact that you saw Gunnar's report, there was only 150 members allowed in ISSLS. And it was it was inclusionary, but it was exclusionary. So many surgeons in North America felt like they couldn't get into this. I remember Frank Eismann telling me the first time he applied to ISSLS, he was turned down. He said, come back in about 5 years when you have more publications. And so it was a very exclusive club. And so many ISSLS members, I think there's been, in the last decade or so, there's been some subtle, sad to say, admittedly, there's been some decline in North American membership into ISSLS, because many of the surgeons, young, bright surgeons particularly, feel compelled to join different societies. And I think all of us in our geographic regions suffer with that to a degree, because we have so many societies now. And so how do we maintain focus here and still attract the best and the brightest? That's going to be a little bit of a focus of what I want to discuss today. And again, this isn't about NASS, but David Wong's here, former president of NASS. He knows the history of NASS very well. NASS came into being about 10 years after ISSLS in North America. And it was the amalgamation of two different societies, one initially formulated by David Selby, who is Scott Blumenthal's original partner at Texas Back Institute, and then the American College of Surgeons, started by John Costwick, another Canadian, Fielding, and others, and then they amalgamated together and merged to become, in 1985, North American Spine Society. And again, I think the growth of NASS, which is now the biggest spine society in North America, in part, not completely, in part was due to the very strict membership requirements for ISSLS, because many surgeons couldn't get into ISSLS. So I would like to have think of the future in mind, and when we think of ISSLS, I think we all in our geographic regions have to devise strategies how we're going to attract our best and the brightest into our organization, which is international. And Gunnar said it's harder and harder to put international meetings together, but I think we still have to fulfill that mission. And we have to call it what it is, competition. And in North America, it's NASS and LSRS. LSRS was started by one of our ISSLS members, Tom Zadevlik, in 2007, because he felt NASS was too commercial and too industry-sponsored. And so many of our younger surgeons in academics belong to these societies. So I do think we need to think forward and how we're going to bring some of those individuals back, at least particularly from North America. Because I think ISSLS' mission, in my own mind, is probably the most noble of all these societies, with no deference to these other societies that carry on their own mission and do it well. And as Gunnar said again, it's foster international collaboration to better study and understand the lumbar spine. We are the most scientific society of any of those. But the real mission is to develop lifelong friendships with some of the most interesting people around the world. If you have an insular society only made up of North Americans, you won't get the world view of what's happening. And I think this is why it's critical for North American surgeons to branch out and do these things. So quickly, my experience, I started coming here 30 years ago. I've only missed, I believe, 2 meetings. The Helsinki meeting, I'm sorry, that's where I first attended. And then in Edinburgh, I missed that meeting. And then I missed the, well, that's a little error. But anyway, it's been instrumental in my life in terms of opening my eyes to the world. And we've been fortunate to be awarded some Volvo awards. I was president in Singapore in 2016. And the most prized thing that I relish the most is the number of fellows that have come through Pittsburgh and in Boston. And then they have become leaders in their own institution once they return. So I'm very proud of that. And without ISSLS, that would have never happened. So I have tremendous memories, tremendous friendships, I think all of us do in this room. And this is what brings us together. This is why ISSLS is great as it is. So I'll end it quickly by saying that we look forward to ISSLS coming to Atlanta, another North American site next year. But I do make a call out for ISSLS to be more inclusive, and I think we've done that. I'm not saying we haven't. I think the membership committee has done a tremendous job to be more inclusive. We have more memberships. I've seen it over the years to increase the numbers from that small number of 150 now. So now it's much bigger. I do make a call out to our North American members to be proactive and attract more bright minds from North America, especially our young surgeons and physicians and scientists to become members of ISSLS. And most importantly, promote more valuable research. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So we'll now have Peter Robertson talk about Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore, and India.
Thank you very much. Look, it's an honour to present amongst the titans of our society and to look to the Asia-Pacific perspective of ISSLS. We've split this into 2, and Dr. Otori is going to talk about Japan, Korea, and China, and I'm going to focus more on what I've chosen to call the southern periphery. You can see the regions I'm going to talk about. It's the younger part of the world, and I want to acknowledge the contribution of Rob Fraser, who wrote an excellent summary of the history of ISSLS when he was president in 2004, and some of this material is his, but also Dino Simakis. Dino has contributed some excellent work on our website, particularly in relation to the relationship between Hong Kong and Australia and the evolution of the society and the evolution of anterior surgery, which I'll touch on. I would strongly recommend, if you've got time, to have a look at these, which are available through the website. So these are the regions we're covering, and the major relationship at the start of ISSLS was between Hong Kong and Australia. I did note there's been some sporting terminology put around there. We're a different part of the world down in this corner. I'd point out that I don't think we have any FIFA World Cups, but we do have 9 out of the 10 Rugby World Cups that have been completed for. The original list of founding or charter members makes for fascinating reading, and you can see at the top of that list there, on the left is Dr. Anderson. I'll come back to this list in a moment, but we've heard of the formation of ISSLS, and people have their own version of history, but in essence, Rob Fraser emphasised that there were 2 streams: the North American stream, again, which we've heard about, initiated by meetings that started to focus on the low back in association with the American Academy of Surgeons and their instructional course lectures. The other stream comes through the liaison between Hong Kong and Australia, and in particular the relationship between John O'Brien and Dr. Hodgson in Hong Kong. So in 1968, the Western Pacific Orthopaedic Association held a meeting, and there was a supplementary meeting alongside that in Hong Kong, devoted not only to spinal conditions, but to spinal conditions with anterior approaches, which I suspect was quite novel for anywhere in the world at that stage. I'll come back to that. 2 years later, in association with the meeting of the combined English-speaking orthopaedic associations, which was held in Sydney, there was a satellite symposium in Ballarat. Ballarat is a region close to Melbourne, where we had our Spine Week meeting last year. That meeting was attended by a huge number of the founders of the society, and if you look in detail at that photo there, you'll notice one thing: it's all men, how we've evolved. And you can see the likes of Narkimson, Farfan and Wiltsey there. Farfan's version was that ISSLS was formed by the Committee of Two that we've heard of. And they were said to have formed this in a somewhat social environment, as you can see. The other person was Alan Dwyer from Sydney. And Alan Dwyer, although a charter member of the society, as best I can understand, never actually attended a meeting. He was diagnosed with esophageal cancer before the first meeting in 1974, and as best I can see, did not subsequently attend meetings, although he was a charter member. As we know, the first meeting was in Montreal in June 1974. The ties between Hong Kong and Australia were huge. Initially, it was with John O'Brien and Hodgson, and then, of course, I've mentioned Ron Beetham. Well, Ron Beetham's been mentioned, and he hosted the meeting in Ballarat. Alan Dwyer was the other key person there. If you look through the list of charter members, those that came from this southern periphery were predominantly Australian, but the group included 21% of the original ISSLS group. There are a number of names you'll recognise there. I've got to say, embarrassingly, I had thought that the Mackenzie that was involved from New Zealand was Robin Mackenzie, the physiotherapist. In fact, it turned out to be Archie Mackenzie, and in the very early days of my training, he was a very senior surgeon, and I do recall operating with him. I didn't realise he was a charter member of ISSLS until I had to do the research for this presentation. The anterior approach was a huge part of surgery from this region, and it's worth just documenting the key steps. Hodgson in Hong Kong popularised or developed the use of anterior approaches to the thoracolumbar spine to treat tuberculosis. Dwyer presented his anterior instrumentation for scoliosis for thoracolumbar curves at that initial meeting in 1968. I don't believe there was any other anterior systems at that time, and it was said that it was quite a jaw-dropping moment for the audience when the patient who'd been operated on only a week before the meeting was able to be paraded on the stage. John O'Brien pursued both anterior and posterior surgery for the failed back, and he did that not only in Hong Kong but then moved on to Oswestry and into central London. And of course, Rob Fraser has been a tremendous contributor with his anterior interbody work in the low lumbar spine with multiple papers. This is just an example of one. In South Africa, they've had some different challenges, and Sonny Govender, who's been a very active member of this society, has done tremendous work on anterior surgery in the modern era for tuberculosis, and particularly tuberculosis when combined with HIV. And that work has also been co-authored by Professor Rajasekaran from India. So if we look at representation, our society is still strongly represented by people from the southern periphery. There are a number of basic science research centres that you can see listed in the middle column there. And although it's not necessarily the only measure of success in terms of research, there have been a significant number of multiple Volvo and ISSLS Prize awards for centres in this region. In terms of governance of our society, there have been several presidents, and I think we were actually overrepresented in terms of the meeting venues you've got listed there. Of course, we were in Melbourne last year, and we head to South Africa for the first time in Africa in 2 years' time. I make mention of the meeting in India, which was scheduled for 2003, and that was transferred to the Northern Hemisphere on the basis of geopolitical concerns a couple of years after 9/11. I'm not sure that Professor Rajasekaran, who I understand is not here, has ever quite got over that, and he continues to lobby for us to attend. But despite that, I want to mention him as a phenomenal contributor to our society from India. He wrote to me as I was giving this presentation, and I think I'll finish with the quote you see there, that he's attributed the benefits of being a member of this society. When you're a surgeon, it causes you to interact with your scientists and become a surgeon scientist. And it's a feedback loop that is a phenomenal advantage for those of us who are clinicians and are members of this society. So I'll finish there, and I'll hand over for the Japan, Korea and China segment for this part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So we would close with Dr. Seiji Otori commenting on Japan, Korea, and China.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Chiba and Sakai, for kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'd like to talk about the 50 years of ISSLS and its evolution from Japan, Korea, and China. This slide shows the current number of ISSLS members. The number of members in the Asia-Pacific region is very large by global standards. And this slide shows the change in the number of ISSLS members in Japan, South Korea, and China. The number is increasing. The number is twice in 2024 compared with 2009. And this slide shows the number of abstracts from 3 countries. Over the last 10 years, the number is increasing. More than 250 abstracts are presented in Kyoto meeting. And this slide shows the ISSLS instructional course held in China. I'd like to thank Dr. Hai, Dr. Luo, Dr. Dai, and Dr. Zhao for their efforts in organizing these courses. And group photos in Beijing in 2001 and 2010 are shown in this slide. This slide shows the past local hosts in 3 countries. Dr. Hasue organized in Kyoto in 1989, Dr. Lee in Seoul in 2014, and Dr. Konno and Dr. Sekiguchi in Kyoto in 2019, respectively. The opening reception party for the 1989 ISSLS in Kyoto is shown. And Dr. Poppe, as a president, stood next to the beautiful Michael girl with a big smile on his face. Dr. Hasue, as a local host, made an opening remark in front of a golden folding screen. I think in the past, these societies were financially well off. the opening reception party for the same meeting. All attendants enjoyed this party. The center of the middle photo appears to be a Dr. Anderson, 35 years ago. Dr. Fraser also had a big smile on his face next to the Michael. Outing and accompanying person program are shown in this slide. All enjoyed our festival and bus tour. Ladies learned how to wear Japanese traditional kimono at the same time. ISSLS meeting at Seoul in 2014 is shown in this slide. Dr. Lee made opening remarks as a local host, and Dr. Fairbank gave a wonderful presidential address in this meeting. The opening reception party in Seoul is shown in this slide. All enjoyed taekwondo, a traditional Korean material art, and Korean music, and wonderful wine and beer. Group photo at the scientific program and at the opening reception party. Many attendants show smile. Dr. Kono and Dr. Sekiguchi organized in Kyoto in 2019. Dr. Kono gave opening remarks at the beginning of the meeting. Dr. Oxland gave an excellent speech as the president. Photo from outing. Group photo in front of one famous temple, shown a Ryoanji Temple, famous for its garden, and Kinkakuji Temple, made of golden leaf. We enjoyed Italian dinner and wine. Banquet is shown. A lot of geisha brought the party to life. Michael can become a geiko after 5 years of training. A ceremony was held to thank the secretary to congratulate lifetime achievement to Dr. Kikuchi. This slide shows past and current and future present from Japan, Korea, and China. Dr. Kikuchi gave a wonderful presidential address in Bergen entitled Internal Collaboration Beyond the Culture Gap. Dr. Takahashi gave a wonderful presidential address in Scotland entitled Support from the World and Gift to the World. Dr. Mamoru Kawakami was scheduled to speak in 2020, but canceled due to global spread of COVID-19 infection. He spoke in Zoom meeting in 2021. He talked about the philosophy of ISSLS and two people in Wakayama history. Finally, we would like to express our deepest gratitude to the following person who provided invaluable cooperation for its presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So I would like to give our presenters small gifts. So I hope you like this symposium. Thank you.
We'll take a picture and finish. just to let you know, the